Welcome back to That's Entertainment, the weekly entertainment show where we look at all the interesting news from last week, this week. Last week, you may have noticed we haven't published anything. We had a member of the team down with a reaction to the jab. Unfortunately, that knocked us out of kilter for a week, but we're back now, and Nick's doing well, which is good. Diving into the entertainment news, the US biggest exhibitor, AMC, now has 4.1 million individual shareholders, with more than 80% of the shares in the company owned by individuals with an average of around 120 shares each, according to Deadline. AMC shares have soared from a 52-week low of under $2 to nearly $73 as retail investors on chat rooms from StockTwits to Reddit's Wall Street Bets showered love on the company. Hate on institutions perceived as shorting the stock, and adoration on CEO Adam Aron, who has been leaning into the phenomenon in a big way. Aron has previously announced that the money raised from this recent sale of shares would be used to revitalize select AMC sites and acquire additional venues for the chain. And it seems that the CEO is acting true to his word with news that AMC are looking to buy up two recently closed high-profile Los Angeles multiplexes, the former Pacific Theater locations in the Grove Mall in Fairfax and the Americana at Brand in Glendale. According to a report in Screen Daily, both venues were spotted on the AMC website and app before they were promptly removed. More worrying news for Netflix and Amazon Prime, Disney Plus et al., all from Britain after a request made by the UK government last week. The streaming services share viewing figures for shows originally shown by the public service broadcasters, the BBC, ITV and Channel 4. There now comes news that Boris Johnson's government is looking to bring streaming services under the remit of Ofcom, the media regulator in the UK that currently oversees the country's traditional TV broadcasters. We've been saying this for years. The European Union needs to step in and start to get a handle of these major platforms because they are literally creaming the top level of content out of each of the European countries with no indication on how things are performing. And I think this is an interesting move by the UK government. Hopefully the European Union will follow. Right-wing broadsheet newspapers and allies of the Conservative government, The Times and The Telegraph, quoted a government source as saying UK broadcasters are having to compete with these giants with one hand tied behind their backs. The companies have deep pockets and go largely unregulated, leaving them free to impose their interpretation of British life. The rules governing the way that broadcasters operate were written for an analog age. They are not fit for purpose in the era of smart TVs, streaming, and on-demand programming. With the pace of change and the increase in global competition, the Cultural Secretary feels it's time to look at how we level the playing field between broadcasters and video-on-demand services and make sure the UK's broadcasting landscape is fit for the 21st century. I think this is a good move from regulation. I think this will open up a lot more fairer discussions for producers as well. And it's interesting that Britain's leading the pack on this charge as well. Across the Atlantic, there was some positive news for streamers when it was announced by Nielsen the traditional TV viewing has now been overtaken by its online counterpart, according to The Hollywood Reporter. In May 2021, streaming was up 6% of the total US TV usage, while over-the-air networks accounted for 25%. Even though cable viewers still make up the biggest share of TV audiences with 39% of users, the growth in streaming viewers is still hugely significant. In spring 2020, streaming accounted for just 18% of viewers, and Nielsen predict that by the end of 2021, streaming audiences could account for as much as a third of all viewers. One other bigger takeaway from Nielsen's report: between Netflix and YouTube make up 12% of all US TV viewers. So again, YouTube propping out of the woodwork as being one of the unsung heroes of the streaming wars. In related news, top media from firm GroupM reckons that the ad spend in the US will be up 22% in 2021 compared to 2019. Significantly, this will be driven by a 39% spike in digital advertising, which, if it continues to grow at the current pace, will account for 57% of the US advertising total spend by next year, and 69% by 2026. And it seems the relationship between streamers and exhibitors are continuing to thaw. Mark Zeradian, the CEO of the US cinema chain Cinemark, has some very encouraging words to say recently about the recent announced Warner Brothers Discovery merger. We're positive about this combination. We think that it could be very good for the industry, and it would be very good for the Warner product. His CFO and Chief Operations Sean Gamble went a step further, telling the 23rd Annual Credit Suisse Communications Conference that Cinemark has already had conversations with Amazon about potentially showing appropriate titles from the streaming service and is optimistic about Amazon's acquisition of MGM. These larger, more established streaming platforms, whether it's Netflix or Amazon Prime, are developing more and more film production capability, and they're investing money in making bigger and more diverse film content. They're looking to theatrical as a way to elevate and differentiate their content. So we look at it as a positive that we have a company like Amazon coming in that's clearly looking to invest more in its content. The new Hollywood is beginning to step up to the table. We're starting to see the new Hollywood studios of Amazon and Netflix purchasing the likes of the established studios. And I think one of the interesting things that we might start to see more of in the future is TV shows potentially beginning to creep into the theatre space. Like I said, one of the most amazing nights I ever had in Copenhagen was the streaming of the Game of Thrones new season, the first episode of each new season at the Copenhagen Film Festival. This was outdoors in April at a very nice outdoor screening in terms of the quality of the sound and the image. But there must have been about 15,000 people in that park. And this is April in Denmark, where, nightly temperatures regularly drop below zero. So, I do think part of the new normal will starting to look at the TV shows that our real audience draws and perhaps starting to make more of a red carpet out of those events as well. Well, here's hoping anyway, because it's all great content. A different report suggests a slightly more worrying future for streaming services in the US, particularly for those burgeoning ad-funded services. According to a report from a technology research firm called Omdia, the average number of video streaming services utilized per US user has fallen for the first time. In a report last week, Omdia claimed that the figure declined from 7.23 in November to 7.06 in April 2021. And according to The Hollywood Reporter, Omdia highlighted, in the past, many have posited an ultimate limit to the number of services a consumer will be able to manage. With US growth stumbling, many will be asking if 7 is the new ceiling for the video streaming video services. And it seems there may be problems for some of the streaming platforms overseas too. Variety reported that Media Partners Asia foresee long-term problems for Disney Plus in the Asia-Pacific region, even though in just over 18 months, Disney has recruited almost 37 million subscribers in the region. And the number could reach 56.5 million by the end of 2021, with $800 million of revenue. But Media Partners Asia have revised downwards the number of Disney Plus and Hotstar subscribers they expect to see in India, from 51 million to 41 million, thanks largely to the weaker-than-normal volume of live cricket caused by the cancellation of the IPL tournament due to COVID-19. According to their report, a large portion of consumers who onboarded in Q2 of 2020 with the launch of Disney Plus have limited incentives to renew subscriptions. Monetization on AVOD remains challenging for Disney Plus, and IPL continues to drive revenues and yields, but inventory utilization on entertainment is low. So that's interesting. The Indian market is largely driven by one sport, which is cricket. I didn't realize that, but that is very interesting. Another key issue they picked up on Disney Plus's reliance on super high-profile but limited content from its Marvel and Star Wars franchises in such territories as Malaysia and Singapore. Disney Plus and Hotstar requires a stronger local content offering in Indonesia, where it risks becoming a franchise superfan platform otherwise. The biggest challenge will be to create and acquire recurring local and exclusive entertainment franchises, including anime, similar to Disney's US tentpoles that sustain customer acquisition life cycles. Well, local content has a very valuable and significant driver of audience interest in every market. So that's an interesting thing that Indonesian audiences are willing to look at services that offer that balance. And yeah, the Disney Hotstar relationship is rather limited in those areas at this current stage. If you have any comments or you'd like to subscribe or share this video, please remember that we both publish to LinkedIn and to YouTube. That's all for now. Goodbye.